Ooh, that's nice. Good morning. Y'all through? Okay. Y'all bow with me, please. Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for the day. Thank you for the blessings that you continually give us individually and corporately. Let us do good work in your eyes. Let us be safe going home. Protect us, lead us, and guide us. In Jesus' name, I pray. Amen. Well, it's been brought to my attention that since I hadn't got our limit on bills this year, what was it, 125? Well, you know how close y'all already are? You know how close we already are to 125? I need Andy Welch here. He's keeping the running total. And he said, Coach, I hadn't even got mine in yet. And Andy will have 6 or 7. Okay. Chairman to the front. Mr. Jaspers. Now, you know, yesterday I thought we had a real good time with Mr. Jaspers. But he has sunk to new lows. I don't know if y'all know this, but Rick has a daughter that is an absolute wonderful human being. He's got her to writing me letters.
Mr. Chairman, in my defense, that was voluntary on her part.
The buddy bill held up even in the letter, and wants me to get it out, and if we do, she'll take me for dinner and beer. Now, I'm not going to turn that down, so Rick, you might get on one day early than you should be.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Rules Committee members. I bring for your consideration, again, House Bill 813. It's a modified open on your blue sheet. It is what we call the buddy bill. And thanks for letting me entertain you yesterday about this and having a bit of fun with what's a very, very serious subject. You know, my daughter and I, as we were talking last night, she said, well, I need to write Chairman Meadows, and so she did that. But sexually transmitted disease control, it's the last thing I thought I'd be here about, but I've been learned a lot. And I was looking at rates last night of these two STDs, chlamydia and gonorrhea. They're serious and they're creeping up. One thing I've learned especially, it's a statewide thing. When you look at the infection cases by population, large counties and small counties are side by side. It's, you know, these diseases, and it's really amazing to me how prevalent it is in small counties. The buddy bill, as I've named it, allows for the listed healthcare professionals to write a prescription to the patient they examined and allow them, if they choose to write an expedited therapy prescription to the partner or buddy. This will allow the treatment of both parties and break the cycle of infection at that point. Of course, you know, public health is very interested in this new type of therapy. You know, I talked to one of my physicians at home. They used to do this all the time. But as the laws changed with pharmacies and prescriptions and data tracking and all, they couldn't do it. And I think they're all very happy that we're going to move on to this. You know, MAG talked to family practice doctors this morning. They're in support of it. And this is one of those things that will save people money and themselves a lot of pain. But I appreciate consideration of House Bill 813, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be certainly glad to answer any questions.
I think it would have been appropriate if you'd have just took this note that she wrote me and read it. And it's about the chairman being out of his comfort zone, uncharacteristic subject matter. But if you don't step out of your comfort zone, you'll never go forward. And the most of it, it isn't expensive, it does no harm, and it truly increases the overall public health of Georgians. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
I'll put that on day 30 or something, you know. Mr. Raffensperger.
Thank you, Chairman, and the Rules Committee for allowing me to bring HB 781 before you for your consideration. It's on modified open rule. This bill would require that American citizens, you have to be an American citizen and a resident of Georgia to be on a state or local government board. We did do some, as it went through the committee process, we did do some carve-outs and exceptions. So in other words, if a business owner didn't live in Georgia, but it lived across the river, say in Columbus, Augusta, or Savannah, that he could then, and he had a business in the state of Georgia, he could be on a government board there. Also, any military people and their families that would be living in the state of Georgia but not really fulfilling the residency requirements as a legal residence. We did a carve out for military folks because we know that they're serving our country. That's an overview of it, and I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Happy to entertain any questions.
The minority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I have a few questions.
Sure.
First and foremost, what precipitated this bill? What situation caused the need to bring this legislation forward?
I believe that government boards, commissions, and authorities should be populated as defined in this bill by American citizens. Many boards are quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative in nature. And in fact, if you read the court case by the Georgia Supreme Court in Shockley versus Fayette County, they ruled such. And as such, if you have to be an American citizen to be on a jury, and a Board of Zoning Appeal, for example, they're making decisions as to assessments, valuation, things like that. And if it requires a jury of your peers to be American citizens, it seemed to me to be a reasonable extension that you would want an American citizen on a board that could affect policy, government policy, your level of taxation, things like that. Thank you.
Can I draw your attention to line 49? So to your response, does this only apply if there's an imposition of fines or fees or levying taxes, or does it apply simply for the application of any type of policy that might be considered?
It's really, if a policy would lead to taxation, then we would, the bill as currently written, you'd want them to be an American citizen. In other words, policy can have broad reaches, but obviously a welcoming committee for a local government, that really is not something that really was going to get into really affecting the taxation of the American public.
Can you show me in line 49 where that is distinguished? Because the way it reads right now, establishes policy is one prohibition. So if you had a keep Dawson County Beautiful Commission, you could not put anyone on that commission if they're establishing a policy related to keeping Dawson County beautiful.
Well, if it spends public funds, I believe it should be reserved for American citizens or a resident as defined in the bill.
But sir, if you read that line, it does not, it says that there are several things. So if you establish policy, you cannot. If you spend funds, you cannot. If you levy taxes, you cannot. Or if you impose or collect fees or charges. Can you show me where this is a compound sentence as opposed to individual prohibitions for boards and commissions?
It stands as it's written.
So you would agree that if you are establishing policy of any kind without respect to the expenditure of funds, this bill would prohibit you from serving on a board or commission? So using the language in line 49, because this is separate provisions, establishing policy is one prohibition, spending funds is a second prohibition, levying taxes is a third prohibition, imposing or collecting fees as charges is a fourth prohibition. There's nothing in here that says that you have to be performing all of these duties at the same time. And so my concern is that given the prohibitions being separate, the way this language is written, you have to live in the state of Georgia for 4 years, be a citizen, in order to serve on a Keep Georgia Beautiful Commission because that commission sets policies because it's created by a local government. Is that not the case with line 49?
I believe that for state boards, it should require a 4-year residency requirement because typically a state board is going to deal of higher import than a local board.
Thank you, sir.
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chokus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a simple piece of legislation that we do annually, and it's the road and bridge dedication. It's H.R. 1052. H.R. 1052, very back page, very bottom. And it simply is the road and bridge dedication for Thomas William Poole, who is in my district, Richard Chambers, Dolores Felder, William Brown, Solomon T. Dover, and Louis Morris.
No questions, but normally we put all road namings and everything in one particular bill, and then it comes at one time. So we'll have others to add to that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll look on your blue sheet under Modified Open Rule, House Bill 738, virtually every county in the state has a county law library. This county law library is funded by fees that are attached to various civil filings as well as some criminal filings. There's a provision in the Georgia law already that sets up a board of trustees that operates these funds to make sure that the law library is kept up to date, has all the equipment it needs. Then it provides that once if there's excess funds that to be used to fund litigants who do not have money for civil litigation. And then what this bill also provides, if there's any excess funds, they can use those excess funds for equipment, furnishings, and things of that nature in the judicial buildings of the county. And it adds the DA to the Board of Trustees of this. The County Commissions Association's all right with it. The DA's all right with it. And Miss Mary Margaret Oliver tuned it up to her liking, so I think everybody is content with it. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask for favorable consideration of it.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, House Bill 876 is third from the top. I must apologize the first 4 times I brought this bill. I did a poor job of explaining exactly what this bill does. The state, as the law is now written, a former senator can walk up to a farmer, show a state-issued livestock dealer license, explain he could provide added value to your heifers by shipping them to his stockyard in Kansas, and you think he's legitimate because he has a state-issued livestock dealer license. You don't realize that he has swindled the last 6 guys. And you shouldn't trust him, not because he was a former state senator, but because the livestock license was issued to his great-grandfather, because currently we have no expiration date on our livestock license. This bill provides for an annual renewal of the livestock license. It enhances our surety requirements to protect the livestock producers in this great state, of which we have approximately 1.1 million cattle, $500 million annual gate value. It is an important bill, and I really request your consideration.
How many times you been here?
This will be number 5, Mr. Chairman.
I wouldn't come back anymore.
All right, thank you, sir.
Ms. Price.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you this morning under Modified Open Rule, HB 826. It's opposite the third hole punch. This bill provides for certain requirements for advertisement or publication of representation of board certification by physicians and to provide for disciplinary action. Basically, it makes it so that physicians can't hold themselves out to be board certified unless their certification comes from the American Board of Medical Specialties or the American Osteopathic Association. And it requires that doctors must state the full name of their board, which is one of 24 member boards of the ABMS or the AOA, as previously mentioned. And this would be in their advertising materials or on their websites. This is a bill that reflects self-policing by the medical profession to ensure high professional standards and the highest quality practice of medicine. And the problem came from truth in advertising that some physicians were holding themselves out to be board certified in a specialty that they did not have rigorous training in. So this is really about transparency, not misleading the public. And I want to stress that it does not affect physician licensure that is purely voluntary. So really it's a consumer protection bill, and I ask your favorable consideration for this bill.
Any questions? Thank you. Mr. Clark, are you getting any sleep?
Yes, sir. Enough to be here in the morning, yes, sir.
How's that baby?
He's doing well. Mom's doing well as well, sir.
How about Daddy?
I'm doing as well as I can be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring before you today under Modified Structure Rule HB 772. This bill is an attempt to address an issue that happened during the special elections this last summer. Currently under Georgia law, during the early voting period, there's a mandatory Saturday that is set 2 Saturdays before the election day, Tuesday. During the special elections, that Saturday fell on July 4th. And so turnout was low, and finding poll workers was difficult because of a holiday. So all I'm attempting to do with this bill is if that mandatory Saturday falls on a holiday weekend, the Thursday through Monday, if there's a holiday during that period, move it back to the previous Saturday, just to allow some flexibility for the Secretary of State's office.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Clark. Thank you. They're everywhere.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you. I bring for your consideration the sub to House Bill 588 on page 2 under modified structure, and it's fourth from the top. This bill calls for an electronic logging system across the board, and it will allow our independent pharmacists and our grocery store pharmacists to have the same system that our big box pharmacists have at this time. And it has also will be free of charge. And our question from our independent pharmacists had to do with a transaction fee. It's spelled out in the bill at this time that there will be no transaction fee. And I bring this humbly for your consideration, House Bill 588.
No questions.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Bring you HB 871. This is some cleanup legislation this year, forwarding the lemon law fees that we collect on new car sales over to Department of Law, Attorney General's office, where we moved the department last year of consumer protection over there, and we did not move the fees with it last year. It's overlooked, so this is just cleaning up that bill and having the fees where the agency is located.
One question.
Thank you.
Mr. Dickey.
Yes.
You've got one question.
You got one question, me. Have we had enough chill hours for our peaches?
This was a good day. Yesterday and today is helping a lot. So, yes, I think by the end of next week, we'll be ready to go.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring you HB 798, which is under modified structure rule, the seventh one from the top. Under present law, homeschool students and other ineligible students receive the Hope Scholarship with a score of in the 80th percentile on the SAT or ACT. That is presently a 1200 or a 26, the same score as is required for eligible students to receive the Hope Scholarship. Also, there is no requirement as far as a test score is concerned for eligible students to receive the Hope. These students receive the Hope only based on a 3.0 grade point average. The other part of this bill is an effort to try to keep our very brightest homeschool students in our state schools by allowing those who have a score at the 93rd percentile to be able to go on and receive the Zell Miller Scholarship going into college rather than retroactively. This will eliminate these bright students from having to go and get a loan or whatever. And we have a substitute, an amendment by Speaker Pro Tem Jones.
Well, I think appropriate at this time, Speaker Pro Tem, you address the amendment.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. AM 331588, it modifies it slightly to distinguish between the SAT administered prior to March 1, 2016 and after that date, because the Scholastic Board is currently modifying the SAT and going back to a two-part SAT, and so this clarifies it in the bill so that it distinguishes between those students who are taking it prior to and afterwards.
Well, let's go ahead and get the amendment out of the way here. You've heard Ms. Jones' amendment. Do I have a motion? All those in favor signify by aye. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Jones, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pizzo, 93.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Today I'm bringing to you House Bill 93, modified structured, back of the page, third from the top. This bill addresses the use of and data collection through automated license plate recognition systems. So next time you get behind a Georgia State Patrol vehicle or possibly your local sheriff's or police department vehicle, you'll notice a camera on the back and the front. What that is doing is snapping photos of every car that passes it going in either direction. It can take hundreds of photos every minute. Now, law enforcement is taking millions of these photos every week, but there's no limit to how much time that they can keep these on file. So under current law, I could run an open records request using Representative Dudgeon's license plate, and I could find out exactly where he goes and when he goes there, going back as far as I choose to file the open records request for. What this bill does is it says that after 90 days, if you are not the suspect of a crime or you're not the subject of an investigation, that data must be purged.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dudgeon.
I've just become extremely nervous about Representative Pizzo's open records request. They bring to you a bill, House Bill 777, in the middle of the modified open rule area. A very simple bill. It would just allow school bus drivers to use a cell phone only if the cell phone has special software basically locked down to be a radio to talk to their base. Right now, the drivers have to buy a radio that's a special purpose equipment, but the cell phone manufacturer have software. They put it on the cell phone, they mount it to the dash. It's a better product, it's cheaper, it's easier, it just makes that very limited exception. So that's House Bill 777. Ask for your favorable consideration.
No questions. Do 34 again.
Yes, sir. House Bill 34, number 2, under modified structured rule. This again allows terminally ill patients to have access to experimental therapies that have been proved safe, but not necessarily the final 8 to 10 year FDA approval. Have been enacted in 24 states, and it's great policy.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and hopefully someday I will have a House Bill 777. It sounds heavenly. I'm bringing before you House. Thank you. I appreciate that, Representative Fleming.
When we get gambling, that'll be a way to win.
I bring before you House Bill 802. It's the second one down under structured rule. This is to increase the state income tax deduction for families who are contributing to the College 529 savings plan. The goal here is to encourage families to be able to save for college and save a little bit more of their own money and prepare their children or their grandchildren for college. Be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? No questions. You want to do the other one too?
Surely. Okay. House Bill 126. It is the under modified open, first one under modified open, which would make it is technically illegal to have a GPS device mounted to your windshield. There are no tickets, to my knowledge, that are being issued on this, but my philosophy has been an unenforced law is one we ought to have off the books. When the code section was written, it was written in the 80s, didn't anticipate GPS devices. So it's a specific allowance to say you can put a global positioning system device if it's not obstructing the view of the driver.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On modified open rule, House Bill 592 provides that we designate structural engineers and reduces the burden on others practicing in the professional engineering field. Glad to answer questions.
No questions. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, House Bill 856 under modified open rule, House Bill 856, a request from our probate courts to up their bond requirements from $25,000 to $100,000. Thank you.
Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, under structured rule, House Bill 849. Bill 849 creates what's a state-level public accommodation law that simply prohibits discrimination in areas of public accommodation, which are usually defined in the bill, certainly, but hotels, restaurants, movie theaters, garages. It's a mirror of our existing federal statute, the state-level statute. On the very off chance that there would be a violation, would allow a party to have an expedited state route to get their matter resolved, as opposed to a protracted, expensive federal route. It's plugging a hole in the law that we've had for too long.
Mr. Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great reluctance, one of my oldest friends down here. We have not necessarily a disagreement on this bill, but I think it needs a little bit of work. He and I have had this discussion. At the appropriate time, if we're going to deal with this, I know it's structured now. I'd like to make a motion that became modified structure so we could amend it in this committee specifically to define that certain noun in there that was in the buddy bill the other day, that there's no definition of sex that was added in the committee. And I've worked on this issue probably most of my legislative career. If we're going to make sure that government does not discriminate, we need to make sure they don't discriminate in anything, not just public accommodation. We don't need to discriminate as government in university admissions. We don't need to discriminate as government in contracting. We don't need to discriminate as government in hiring. If we're against discrimination, we need to make sure, if we're going to make a statement as a government, that we don't discriminate in any manner, in any way, in any shape or form. So at the appropriate time, if we do go that route, I'd like to offer a couple amendments.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the latter part first, while I'm not unsympathetic to the gentleman's issue, I think there may be an issue with regard to germaneness as it relates to that particular subject matter, since we're talking about public accommodation as opposed to contracting. That's a ruling that was, when that amendment was offered in the Judiciary Committee, which approved this bill unanimously, that ruling on germaneness was made. That certainly doesn't bind the Rules Committee. in any way, shape, or form, but I have my sense is that that would ultimately be the ruling if it ever did go to the floor with that language in it. That's just a personal prediction on my part. As it relates to the term sex was added as an amendment in the full committee. I believe every state that has a public accommodation law has sex as a protected class, and that's 40-something states. We're one of 4 or 5 states that doesn't have it. And I think the reason why it's not defined, or there's no need to define it, is because it's already defined. It's not the type of thing at this point where it's one or the other. I mean, it's male or female, whereas there may be other potential protected classes that would necessitate a definition. My only response is that sex doesn't really necessitate a definition, although I don't think it would be harmful. I don't think it would be harmful. I just think it's sort of a belt and suspenders type approach to it. But
can I make a suggestion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
It's not going to be on Tuesday's calendar. Y'all both from up around Cobb County, ain't you? Y'all chat a little bit and come back and tell me how the conversation went. Is that okay? All right, Mr. Powell, you got your phone cut off, or you just?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Phone cut off. I just didn't know that I had picked it up, and I didn't. I'm too stupid to know how to cut it off. Bring a couple bills to the committee. First, HB 764 came out of the Public Safety Committee. This deals with drivers and crosswalks. This new day and time, we've got lighted crosswalks and the rectangular flashing beacons. Nowhere in code are these covered, and we're finding out that if they're not covered, there can't be citations posted on them. There's no validity to that new type of crosswalk. Georgia Department of Transportation wrote the language, basically defined these, and it's a very cleaned up bill and needs to move forward to in Georgia code for the crosswalks, these new lighted crosswalks.
Any questions for Mr. Powell on that one? No questions. Next.
Second bill, Mr. Chairman, very popular bill. We had the Georgia Realtors down here the day before yesterday. House Bill 869. This is a update and upgrade to the real estate licensure laws in the state of Georgia. First provision, it got rid of some antiquated rules and regs that the Georgia Real Estate Commission agreed to. Just things such as that a broker has to review all offers made. In this day and time, there's so many frivolous offers that really the only thing needs to be scrutinized is offers that are put forward to the seller. But most importantly, Section 2 of this bill, the federal law has changed this past year on closing documents, what we brokers always called HUD documents that were given out. It had the information on both the buyer and the seller. Under the new federal regulations, under the TILA-RESPA Integrated Disclosure Act, it says that as a broker, me nor my agent, we have no business keeping records of someone's personal information that was a buyer. We only deal with our seller side or the reverse. And this puts Georgia law back in compliance with the federal rules and regulations so that the brokers and the sales agents that are real estate licensed in the state, that they can do exactly what the law, and the law should say exactly what we need to do.
Any questions? Mr. Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to put my name next to and support HB 34, Representative Duncan's Georgia Right to Try Act. Please, sir.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just put my name next to the Georgia Lemon Law, HB 871.
Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to put my name beside House Bill 876, licensure for livestock dealers.
Okay. I'd like to bring y'all's attention to House Bill 838. Mr. Blackman can't be here. That's my bill. That's an insurance commission bill. It passed out of insurance day before yesterday with everyone voting for it. I just want to play by the same rules y'all do. It's if there's any questions to me, you just go right ahead. Another. Y'all are getting better at this. Okay. It's my intention to step it up a little bit starting next week. Mr. Fleming, do you have one?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to put my name besides House Bill 838.
I appreciate that support. But now it's starting. Okay, who's that? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I voted for 838 in committee.
He did.
I would like to put my name next to House Bill 738 as amended. 798, I beg your pardon. 798 on the back page.
Mr. Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for House Bill 738. It's a good bill that needs to be addressed, and it's just something that'll help with local library boards, or law library boards.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to put my name by House Bill 588. That's the new tracking system for certain controlled substances. Representative Clark's bill.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. We're going to set the calendar. This is for Tuesday. Y'all don't show up Monday. All right. Under modified open, HB 561. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified open, HB 592. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, HB 738. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, 882. Any opposition? Modified open, 883. Any opposition? Modified open, 884. Those are insurance. There's department bills, just to do them all at one time. Is there any opposition to 884? It's on. On the back, go to modified structure. HB 34. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 588. Any opposition? It's on. Modified structure, HB 764. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 798. Y'all remember that we have passed the amendment, so it'll be on. Under modified structure, HB 853. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 871. Any opposition? That's it. That's Tuesdays. Remember that. Tuesdays. Which one? Down at the bottom. I can call him back if you want to do it. Hey, let's start. Whoa, 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 whoa. Everybody sit back down. We're back in here for just a second. I got so carried away with Ms. Jones' amendment to 588 or whatever, 798, that I didn't give Ms. Jones the opportunity to present her bill. And she is, next in line, so we'll let her do hers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're very kind. It was actually me who failed to ask for it. I wanted to ask for House Bill 885, which would bring the Fulton County County Board of Health in line with all other 158 county boards of health by repealing a population bill. This was brought to me by the Georgia Department of Public Health and is also supported by the County Commission, which took a vote on their legislative package, which included this.
Any questions? We ain't gonna start on time. He's just done that 4 times. Okay, I'm going, under modified open, I am going to add HB 885. I heard a move earlier on. Any opposed? It's on. Now we're done. I'm sorry.